Hi, everybody, and welcome to Expert Insights, brought to you by Double H Marketing. I'm Trent. I lead the growth here at Double H, which basically means I spend a lot of time with Salesforce teams and marketers trying to make sense of how all the moving parts come together.
And I'm Pask. I look after the technical side at Double H. Data, architecture, social strategy, and all the fun stuff behind the scenes that makes personalization work.
Okay, cool. We are talking about personalization today. In fact, hyper personalization, which is everything behind hopefully those awesome emails that you are starting to see as everybody gets a grapple on this. But Pask, when I say hyper personalization, what do you think that actually means to you and people around us?
It's a great question because it really depends on who you're talking to. For some people, hyper personalization just means, oh, I want the name in the comms when it goes out. But for others, it's about having the right offer or the right feature of an offer when it's in there. And very often people think, oh, it needs to be, at the level of each person should get their own individual offer that is unique to them. But the reality is, for a lot of people, they don't actually have that many offers that they can show to people and that many products. So it's really about finding what's best for the person, not what's easy to execute on.
Yeah, I definitely remember I had a small tenure as a marketer for a retail organization, and the big nirvana for us was that if somebody purchased a particular, in my case, it was a particular type of metal jewelry. We didn't want to really show anything to them other than that type of metal. It's surprising how fickle people can be around their preferences, and essentially it means the difference between somebody actually opening and reading what you've got or passing by it, just like every other unpersonalized piece of communication. But can you share an example where context-aware personalization has really worked for you?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, right? Because when you look at a bunch of records, you'll be able to say, for example, oh, trends looking at, in your example, you're looking at jewelry, you care about this type of metal. But the interesting thing is that the context also changes how that looks. So you may be someone who's really interested in a specific type of product, but if you start acting like somebody completely different as well, the context becomes really, really relevant here. Some of the examples that we've had for some of the organizations we've worked with are things like if you're showing a bunch of content that is suitable for people who are looking at renting a house, for example, and but they suddenly start having some context that shows that this person is no longer looking at renting, but looking at buying. Basically, you need to completely change your personalization approach to this because it's no longer a renter that's looking at certain criteria, it's now a buyer. And in that particular case, one of the things that's really interesting is that the thing that you're going to buy is going to be potentially completely different to what you're renting, right? The classic case you get is I'm looking at renting in the inner city, it's going to be a flat, but then people have this thing when they go, oh, I'm going to buy a house now, and that means they move out to the suburbs because obviously the budgets are quite different.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'd love to be able to afford the place next to where I'm living and renting, but that's a really good point. And to extend on that, I guess context is one thing, but what about behavioral side of things?
Right. So that's the how those things fit in together, right? And the behavior that you get around it. So, and the reason for me that it's important is that it's very easy to go, oh, I have a group of people, or this person's been identified as someone that's interested in inner city flats, in my example. But when you've gone to change and your behavior suddenly is, I'm looking at doing something else around that, then it's going to be different. We see it in all the industries, right? For example, in financial services, you have people who are interested in credit cards, for example, or a personal loan, and suddenly they're looking at home loans, suddenly looking at insurance. So something major has happened in their lives that we aren't aware of yet because we don't have the details of that. But when we start seeing their behavior, it lets us know, hey, something's changed. So maybe we should do something different here.
So we here at Double H obviously have a really large plethora of customers across different industries and types, and we get to play every day with all the cool stuff across Data 360 and Einstein across sales and service and marketing. All of these intuitive tools to help personalize, hyper personalize, without telegraphing a particular tool. Which part of it do you think you're seeing the most effectiveness in enabling personalization? Which part of the stack, or is there some examples you can call out in real world products at Salesforce today?
Yeah, there's two sides to this because on one side you want to collect more data to allow you to make some of the decisions or put it somewhere where you can see it, and then the other side of it is how are you going to actually activate that? into something that you can use. For some people, activation means I want to show a different offer on a website, or I want to guide people towards something that I think is probably going to be relevant to them. And I'm willing to be, wrong sometimes on that, but based on the information we have, the best guess it's related to this. For others, it's going to be something more pointed. It might be an email, it might be an SMS. It can go all the way to creating a task in Salesforce CRM so that someone's going to go, oh, I need to call this person because they have exhibited the behavior. That means that they probably need a call from us.
It's funny, right? Some of those very simple personalizations and very simple, I guess, automations to, like you said, even just flag something very minor to happen, like an occasional email by a salesperson, or even just a simple, change of a picture on the hero of a website can make a huge world of difference. But, there's, with all these options there, where do you see starting out? Where are the first steps in setting up a data foundation for personalization?
That's a great question. Personally, I like to try and collect data as soon as possible so you have a view of what's going on. So that means making sure that your website is compliant on privacy regulations, making sure that you have a policy that matches up to what you're doing, and then start collecting data on that. As soon as you can start identifying people on your website, that's great. There are your more engaged prospects or customers, so you can generally do more around that. And then start collecting that. It can take a while until you really have enough volume in there to be able to understand what's going on. So the earlier you start that, the better. In fact, we've seen some customers start collecting information around website use before they even really know what they're going to do. But having the data there allows them to get smarter as they go on, time goes on.
I've definitely had that conversation with a few customers where they're like, oh, which data should we collect and where does it need to come from, etc. Now, obviously adhering to all of the things that we need to as marketers, collecting as much data as possible can be, a gold mine. The data really is super valuable. And I think as you proceed through your growth and utilizing data more in different ways, you'll probably find that what you didn't think was important at the beginning is really important towards the end of your journey. So outside of that, speaking of maybe overcomplicating things, where do you see that from initial stages from customers?
So for me, it's really about that initial data collection. Get something in, have some data, do some matching as soon as you can, and be aware that it's a process. It's not like you go, I'm going to do a hyper-personalization project, and then you go and then you bang away at it for a few weeks, a month, and then you come out and you say, ta-da, it's done. We now hyper-personalized, because it's going to keep changing. And you'll find in some areas you're being really effective, and in others it's making little difference for whatever reason. And so you have to look at where it's making no difference and go, okay, is that okay? Is it not okay? Maybe it's making a difference because some of our assumptions were incorrect, and we need to adjust our assumptions. In other cases, it might be, there's not much that's possible here. So maybe instead of trying to optimize for a better customer experience or optimizing for more revenue, we might optimize for, let's make sure these people cost us less money, right? If it's people who are looking at, for example, the service area maps, or who are reading the T's and C's as to how and when you deliver, next day, maybe it's not a huge amount you can do at that stage if they're already a customer. It's someone that's upset. How do we reduce the cost of serving that person and making things better for the organization as a whole?
Yeah, I had a really lucky chance to work with a really aspirational CEO at one point, and they were actually, it was really funny, they took pride in kind of not knowing their customer, which sounds weird on face value, but they were always searching for ways to find more data to enhance their knowledge of their customer. They always relished the opportunity where you could prove something that they weren't aware of or that they didn't quite fully cover the bases on, and use that information for better. And rather than taking it as an insult that they might not know everything, they took it as in their stride and actually enhancing their own knowledge of their customer base through lots of, I guess, some of the tools that were made available through Salesforce for collecting data in different ways. But look, this has been an awesome conversation. I really do think that the future of communication involves, much more personalization to become much more relevant in what is really a storm of marketing. But let's end with something fun. What's the biggest fail you've seen?
There's a few that I've seen that are make me go, that's not quite right. The biggest ones is when you make something that's too personalized and looks like it's targeted at you, but the message is completely wrong. The places where I've seen that the most actually are around people who are targeting execs, because generally speaking, a lot of execs have a different group of people reading their emails. And
Right.
so sometimes the records get crossed. So, for example, you may have a high level exec, and then you may have a junior executive assistant. And suddenly the exec's calling you, going, "Why are you sending me all this messaging about X?" And you're like, well, your EA is using your computer and she's really interested in that.
I have to say that it's something similar that I've seen in the past, which is maybe not an automation fail as much as is maybe an insight to the family member. I vividly remember working and seeing a story written about how hyper personalizing product recommendations started to show up a lot of baby products after it seemed like somebody used their loyalty membership or purchased online through a supermarket a pregnancy test. So, yeah, it was probably a rude shock for some people in that family at that time to see those things popping up without maybe knowing fully about it and wondering why. But no, there's definitely probably a fine line between being a bit of a stalker online versus actually providing an amazing customer experience. So
That's
thank you so
right.
much, Paz, for joining me today and talking about hyper-personalization. If you or any of our listeners out there are interested in learning more about hyper-personalization, how we do it here at Double H, or what Salesforce has to offer, please reach out to us at info@doublehmarketing.com.au or hit a comment in the podcast here and we'll follow up with you. Thank you so much for listening.